Welcome, Facebook.
Facebook
Chuck
crew.
Wright and I are here with you. This is James Blythe and my beautiful wife, Diane, running social media. If you got comments, you got questions, put them in the chat, and Diane will be able to respond and we'll be able to help you out. Thank you for being on board. Thank you for being part of the Veterans Impact Show. So here we go to broadcasting. Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where we continue the mission of highlighting veterans and service organizations who continue to serve our community and our nation. We're brought to you by Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Don't worry, retire happy. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. I got to tell you, I love that t-shirt. This is Chuck Wright. If you don't know, I'm James Blythe. He's Chuck Wright. I'm Navy. He's Marine Corps. And his t-shirt says "Born in a Bar." And I could make a bunch of comments about that, but that's really where the Marines got started.
That is exactly in Ton Tavern in Philadelphia. And the first commandant of the Marine Corps was there that day signing up
Marines
to join the fight.
I got to tell you, joining the fight. Hey, one of the most delightful men that I have met, Lieutenant General John Campbell. He started the National Defense Briefing Series, and it is great. Diane and I have been to everyone and our sponsors. We have enjoyed it, from Admiral Pat Walsh to recently we had Admiral John Richardson, who was CNO. There is an amazing program coming up. General Campbell, please tell us, what have you got coming with the National Defense Briefing Series?
Hey, thanks, Jim and Diane and Chuck, for being such great supporters. That really means a lot to us, and I think we're getting our feet under us. And as you said, we've had some great programs. We've got a really good one coming up on June the 11th. I think this will be our 10th program. We called it the Southern Border Perspective, and two of the participants are pretty well known around the area. Sheriff Jim Skinner, Collin County Sheriff, and Congressman Keith Self, our new 3rd District representative to Congress. And by the way, Keith has been a supporter also. I think he's been almost every one of these events.
Yep.
Our third participant this year for this program is Brigadier General Matt Barker, who is the commander of Joint Task Force Lone Star, which is the Texas Military Department presence on the southern border. So those three gentlemen are going to talk about southern border perspectives from, Keith, the policy and political perspective, Sheriff Skinner from law enforcement, and General Barker from the military perspective. And if there's a more topical subject to talk about, I don't know what it's going to be. Now, the problem with border discussions is they turn political pretty quickly. We're going to try to not do that. Our policy is non-political, not partisan. We want to talk about issues and problems and results and solutions, not get into a political back and forth. So it's going to be a Sunday night, June 11th, Heritage Ranch Golf and Country Club over in Fairview. I think our registration starts at 4:30 and the program starts at 5. It's a dinner meeting, $45, and I think it's I expect it to be sold out.
John, we have so enjoyed every one of those. And Chuck, you've been in with us a number of times as well.
I think I've made about half.
You made about half. Well, let me tell you, there's two things that go on. Number one, the speakers that you have had, which are amazing. You're talking about 4 stars. You're talking about people that were involved in diplomacy in Europe and in Southeast Asia. You're talking about people like Colonel John Antel that teach leadership and what he was talking about, and he's been working with the military. It's amazing. But you know what I enjoy as much as just the speakers? The camaraderie of the level of people that are there. Everything from, master chiefs and sergeants to 4-star generals, and I'm telling you.
And then guys like you and I.
Yeah, and guys like you.
That were at the bottom of the food chain.
Well, but it's an opportunity to be with veterans who are making a difference, who are continuing the mission.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
That is part of what this is all about, is veterans who are continuing the mission. And by the way, Congressman Self is a Marine.
No. West Point grad.
Well, West Point
was Army.
Okay. Yeah. Well, poor poor guy. What can I say?
Yeah, he didn't have what it took to be a Marine. And I say that for our listeners, Congressman Sell, I consider him a friend. I have known him for years.
He was.
He is
anyway.
an outstanding. He was. Now I'm off the list. He's not taking my call anymore. He has been an outstanding political leader. He was an outstanding officer in the Army. Left with a Bronze Star. Just an amazing man. I'm proud to know him.
I think it's important too, because as you said, we're going to get away from the political rhetoric and we're going to focus on solutions by people who know and understand the solutions and the ramifications of what are going on right now. If you don't understand what's going on, then you're not going to understand how to get it solved. And it's a serious, serious, serious problem. One of the things that I think a lot of people need to know is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we're one of the leading cities in the nation with a terrible reputation in human trafficking.
Yep.
We are a crossroads for a lot of bad things that are coming across the border. And that's why we really need to focus on immigration and being able to get this under control.
Yeah, and Jim, you're absolutely right. We'll turn it over to John. But one thing that I wanted to say is it's a little bit frustrating that we're so worried about slavery from 150 years ago. And I think we can all agree that slavery was evil. What my question is then why is it okay today? Why is it okay today if it was evil back then? And I thought it was evil back then. Of course, I'm not that old, not like Jim. We're having entirely too much fun. It's Saturday morning. My coffee hasn't quite cranked in yet. But, John, talk about kind of how you envision this evening going and the discussions that our potential audience members will be listening to.
Yeah, well, I want to go backtrack a little bit to Jim's comment. We try to set up an atmosphere at these things where, number one, there's really not any rank there. I mean, we're all a bunch of old retired guys and gals, but we structure this thing so we have plenty of time to have a discussion, and that was our model. We want interactive discussion, so we let the speakers do their thing for 15 minutes, but then we want to have a question and answer format. And I think that's really effective in breaking down any barriers that might exist, because people get a chance to ask the things that they want to know about from these speakers. So I think that's one thing that helps set the atmosphere there. I asked Keith if he would moderate this one, because with three speakers, if you have a fourth person as the moderator, frankly, it becomes difficult to find time. So I think this will let Keith guide the discussion the way he wants. And by the way, Chuck, I have to share your opinion of Keith. He's not only a great political leader, but was a great county judge. He's just a good person. Yep. And I think in the end, his heart's in the right place. While he's a politician, I think he's going to steer this discussion in a way where we drill down on the issues and on the things that we can, as Americans, ought to know, and the things we may be able to do. Now, in the end, that may turn into a political decision, but we as Americans have got to understand the facts and what we can do, and that's kind of the objective. And I think
I want to go back to the point you just made, because I think it is so relevant today. This is an opportunity to find out what is going on from us, and I'm really looking forward to the general who's a part of the Texas State Guard, because he's boots on the ground down there. And I have a friend of mine who has spent a lot of time down there and is getting ready to go back. He just got promoted to lieutenant colonel. And it's fascinating when you talk to the guys and girls, and I use the term generically, but when you talk to the people that are down there, you get the raw facts. There's no political slant to it. There's no bias. No one's trying to push an agenda. And unfortunately, our media has become a propaganda arm for whatever side they want to pander to.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get the facts. And so organizations like yours do a great job of educating the public.
And I think when you go back, with your briefing series, you have focused on how these things, for instance, Pat Walsh, Admiral Pat Walsh, he was talking about Southeast China Seas, correct? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And John Antal was talking about it. And so each one has talked about how these things affect us as Americans and as our country. And that's what's important about this, because it's not overseas. It's not 3,000 miles from here. It's here. It's now. It's in our backyard, our front yard, and it's all over the street.
Well, you know, our traditional way of war over years has been we've sort of protected by two oceans. We're 3,000 miles away from any fight. We have lots of time. That's what happened in World War II. We had 2 years to build up and become, you know, crank up our industry. We're not going to have that again. If we do fight in the Pacific, we're going to fight with what we've got there today. So it's not something we have time to think about when the balloon goes up. We got to be thinking about it today and get ready. And I think the men and women in uniform and our military leaders are on that. They're all over that. I don't think it's penetrated to the American public, though. And by the way, Pat Walsh did a great job, but that was a year and a half ago, and things progressed. And I think we may want to do another China Pacific show again here pretty quick.
Very much so.
Without a doubt, I'm talking to him about Navy League and talking to him about being on our broadcast. And man, I would love to get him to come back and talk about that, because it's so important right now. People don't realize what's going on. And so the same sort of negative things, only with different technologies and different things that are happening on our southern border.
Yeah, very, very much so. And as you were talking about, John, the two oceans, and we've got 2,000 miles of border with Mexico, and almost all of it is flowing like a sieve right now. And it's not the Mexican people that are coming in here to work. Those are the ones that I'm the least worried about. Yeah. They're going to take jobs and they're going to work. And quite frankly, they're going to take jobs nobody else is going to take.
And they work hard.
And they work hard and they have family values. I've got zero problem with that. And it's going to be one of the questions that I will be asking. This time I'm going to learn. I couldn't figure out why my questions weren't going through. I was trying to email them in from my phone, but I got fat fingers and I don't do the technology well. And they were bouncing back. Really? So I'm going to have this question written down. But I want to talk about one of the things that really concerns me. The people on the terrorist watch list. How many of them are getting through? Because we're catching some of them, but we're not, if you're catching one, how many get away?
Yeah.
And that's where the real threat comes to us, not to mention the threat of fentanyl coming across the border. And it's hilarious. The Chinese, the Secretary of State Blinken called him on the carpet on it. I was like, good for you. And they just denied it. And it's like, this is insane.
Nathaniel, let's put up the National Defense Briefing Series website so people can go to it. I'm not sure if we're necessarily set up for this next one in June. Okay. And so what we want people to know is, if you want to join, if you want to be a part of it, and you're in North Texas, or if you want to come into town, then go to the National Defense Briefing Series and take a look at our partners. That's really important to everybody. Then there is also a donate button, and you're going to have up pretty soon how they can buy the tickets to go to that. It's going to be a really, really strong. So there's your donation. If you'd like to donate, Diane and I donate. We believe in this because it's education. And we also, you have had, John, JROTC, Sea Cadets, and a number of young people as well. And as I understand it, this thing, they get a credit opportunity from the JROTC. So this is Jim Blythe and Chuck Wright, and we're with Lieutenant General John Campbell. And we're talking about the National Defense Series briefing and how important that has become been going on for a year and a half. Thank you for hitting that up, General Campbell. It's made a huge difference. And thank you for passing on playing mud golf today. I mean, I think that could have been a kind of a tough deal for you.
It might have been a tough call. We might have been talking to an empty chair.
Yeah, but
we'd have vamped for you real well.
Well, and you're going to be with us at Bear Creek for the Army.
Yeah,
well, we'll talk about that later. So let's take a break. Veterans Impact Show. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. And thanks to our sponsor, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation. Thank you, and thank you for being on board. We're talking about the National Defense Briefing Series that's headed up by Lieutenant General John Campbell, U.S. Air Force retired. John, thank you for being on board with us today. And this is really important because the next one that's coming up, June the 11th, is going to be about the border and about talking about immigration. And Chuck, you were talking about General Matt Barker and with the Texas Guard and how they're down there. How many people did you say are on the border?
We have over 2,000 state guardsmen on the border. I don't know how many ICE agents. I don't know how many Border Patrol agents we have. We have a very large contingent from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Governor Abbott has done a ton. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and be a little political. He's done a ton to do the job the federal government's refusing to do. And it's their job, and they're trying to say, well, you can't do that because that's our job. And Governor Abbott looked at him and said, well, you know what? If you'll come down here and do your job, I'll stop.
Yeah.
Because it'll save me a bunch of money.
And I think one of the key things that you've talked about in this, John, is immigration reform. I'd like to hear from these men because we have got to change immigration reform somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Immigration reform is kind of a whole nother issue. We gotta stop this problem, but that will get real political. John, if I might, talk a little bit about how you created the National Defense Briefing Series, how that idea came about, and then how it's gone on. And if you're doing this once a quarter and you've done 10, we're talking about 2.5 years, not 1.5 years. Typical pilot, the numbers.
Well, you know, that's close enough for government work, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it sort of came out of we were having coffee one morning with folks from some of the other groups that are now partners in this, and you guys both know Bob Epstein. Bob's a well-known guy around town, very, very active and supportive in all sorts of veterans activities. And he came up with the idea, and he said, "Hey guys, you know, we can put on, if we pool our efforts, we can put on a really quality set of programs." And he said, "I think there's good fundraising potential, and that's important because all of our groups have charities that we support. None of us are rich, so we depend on the money we can bring in through fundraising to support the charities." And that initial discussion sort of developed into the idea that we can put together a group like this. In fact, we're incorporated now. We have a board of directors. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. So that helps out quite a bit. But the basic idea was, let's bring in nationally known experts to talk about issues that are important to all of us as American citizens. And I mean, no disrespect to the Rotary clubs, but this was the anti-Rotary club discussion where you bring a person off for 30 minutes, feed them lunch, and they're gone. We want to bring them in for 2 hours. We do have dinner, but the majority of our programs, and you guys know because you've been there, is devoted to question and answers. And we want the audience to get the questions they have up to these speakers who can, you know, answer the things they want to know. And we got various ways to do that. You know, we do it by email. We do it by question cards. We can stand up and get a microphone and ask your question. We videotape all of these programs, and we've got, I think, all but 2 of the programs. If you go on that website that you guys brought up, you can click on there and see pictures and videos from all these discussions. So we archive that, and it's a pretty good record of achievement. So that's our model. You know, we said, let's pool our efforts, and there's strength in numbers. We all have individual things we do. In the end, we're all about the same thing, and that's stronger defense taking care of veterans and learning about world issues.
I think it's great because not only these things are going on, but the camaraderie, being able to meet with other veterans who care enough to be there, who are really continuing the mission and care enough to hear it, care enough to be there. And these are the kind of people that we want to hang out with, as well as inviting all of these young men and women that are Sea Cadets and JROTC. And this is not an inexpensive program to put on, because I know you guys are spending some real money to bring some of these speakers in. I know John Richardson came all the way from Indianapolis. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you a story that I heard of Navy League from John Richardson. And this is really speaking to the importance of this series and what it's doing.
So you notice that Jim has referenced Navy League several times, and he's a member of Navy League, which is one of the sponsors of the program. But the other thing that we want to share is the days immediately before the June 11th meeting, which I think will be an excellent National Defense Briefing Series meeting. The Navy League is going to be in Dallas having their national meeting.
Yes.
So all of you squids and rust pickers, bonus points if you can tell me the movie that line came out of.
All right. Let's take a break before I get in trouble. Right back with Veterans Impact Show. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show. And thanks to our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation. John, we were talking about how all of this came together. One of the interesting things is, how have you been able to get some of the quality and level speakers? These are national known. I mean, John Richardson, Chief of Naval Operations, Pat Walsh. And I'm getting to know Pat Walsh. He does a charity here for kids in Dallas that's amazing. How were you able to talk to these men and women and come in and say, hey, be a part of this? Because they have been so enthusiastic and informative. I mean, this is not your normal kind of deal. Wouldn't you agree, Chuck?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. Well, number one, Chuck, The Great Santini was the movie.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yes, with the incomparable Robert Duvall. What a great movie that is.
Yeah. But no, back to your question, Jim. Mainly it's kind of personal relationships. We actually started out Pat Walsh. We got because I have a good friend who works for Lockheed Martin and tried to get. He was the Air Force commander in the Pacific, and we started off. I called him. And he said, look, I'm not as current as my buddy Pat Walsh is. And so he gave me Pat's contact info, and that's how that one worked. Since then, it's been mainly personal relationships. And frankly, we get referred by some of the past speakers to new prospects who say, hey, this is really worthwhile. You ought to go down and consider it. We've leveraged the Navy League connections. Barry Brown is on our board of directors. And Barry works the Navy League. That's how I got John Richardson. And that's how I got Jim Fogo, who spoke on naval power. I also go with the Air Force Association Mitchell Institute. And that's how we got Heather Penny. That's how we got General Kevin Schulten. So it's just a matter of personal relationships.
I hate the fact one of the meetings that I missed was with Heather Penny, who is she's seen all over. Yeah, she's an amazing.
Let me tell you,
lady.
She's dynamite. She's got such a cool backstory too. And maybe you know that when she was a second lieutenant.
I don't.
Well, she was a second lieutenant F-16 pilot with the DC Guard flying out of Andrews. And on the day of 9/11, it was drill weekend. So they're in there having their pilot meeting when the planes hit the World Trade Center. Well, the DC Guard is unique because they're kind of out of the chain of command of the National Guard. They work directly for the White House. And they finally got a launch order from the White House military office. He said, just get something airborne. So the squadron commander said, I'm taking off. Come with me, Penny, Second Lieutenant Heather Penny. The airplanes were not armed. They were building up missiles and loading guns, but they weren't ready to go. So they took off in 2 unarmed airplanes. And as they're walking out to the airplanes or running out to the airplanes, the squadron commander said, Lieutenant Penny said, if we have to take an airplane down, I'll ram the cockpit, you ram the tail. And that's what they took off, ready to do.
I know that story, but I did not know that was her. That makes her even more impressive. She and it is absolutely true story. They took off unarmed.
And her, by the way, there's a podcast on the Mitchell Institute website where she tells that story. It's a 9/11 retrospective, and if that doesn't make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, nothing will.
It's funny you say that because I've got goosebumps literally right now. I'm like, wow, the courage by the way, that would take.
There's another piece of that. Her father was an airline pilot flying that day.
Oh my God.
Oh wow. You mean she could have had to bring her own father down? Whoa.
Yeah.
Man.
Because that last plane was heading for the Capitol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the plane. Another an amazing book titled Let's Roll, the wife of Todd Beamer, who was heard broadcasting, but a group of passengers basically said, no. Yeah. And they took the plane back and crashed it.
Yeah. We were up at Shanksville, the Shanksville Memorial a couple of weeks ago. I've been up there many times. We visit friends. We always go up there, and that's a moving place. And they've archived some of the phone calls that were made by the passengers on the plane, and it's really moving to hear them make what they are pretty sure is going to be their last phone call.
Oh man.
Sorry, powerful stuff. I got us off on a little bit of a tangent, but I'm hating the fact that I missed Heather. That would have been a great American to visit.
Well, if you can actually go to the website, and I'm pretty sure, I'm looking at it right now, I'm pretty sure that the video of that presentation is up, so you can see but she's become a leading spokesman for air power. And
you
know, and Fogo
she had a foundation. I remember that she was involved or heads a foundation for all of this research and things that she's doing. I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, she's involved in she's on the Experimental Aircraft Association. She's involved with the Women in Aviation. She's a real voice particularly for women in aviation. So she's quite a smart lady.
That is fantastic. Well, John, let me ask you a really leading question. You may not be there yet. What are some of the ideas and what are some of the things that you're going to do for this series in the future? Have you thought about that, or are you working towards that?
We'd like to get our lineup set for the next year. We're looking at number one, as I mentioned when we were chatting before the show started, we're going to do our testimonial gala for a local leader who has been a contributor and interested in Veterans Affairs. We're not ready to talk about who that is, but we'll announce that probably in a month or so. That'll be in September. And I think that's going to be a dynamite program, and it'll be somebody that most people recognize. Beyond that, we're looking at a couple of ideas. One is a program on unmanned aerial vehicles and artificial intelligence, and how that will play out, where that technology is going to go. I mean, we're talking about potential for autonomous lethal drones. If that doesn't scare you, it scares me.
Well, and that was that's an expansion of Colonel John Antall's conversation.
That's right. About that 7
very
minutes.
Much about technology.
That 7 minutes to die, about that little known war, that everybody is looking at that as a textbook case. And he got up and talked about that. We've had him on the program numerous times. And that is an amazing discussion.
Well, you take what Antall talked about and multiply that by 10 and put artificial intelligence with it.
That is scary.
It is. Yeah. We're also working on a program on critical infrastructure protection. That sounds like kind of a dry subject until you dig down a little bit and think about the vulnerability of our electrical grid, communications, water distribution, transportation, all the things we depend on to make America run. and they're
John,
all
I'm going to
vulnerable.
segue, as I am notorious for doing, to talk about Galarruga, who's coming up, an upcoming guest, but to talk about Tom Clancy. One of Tom Clancy's books was exactly about that, and I want to say it was Dead of Honor. I had to get in the Wayback Machine in my brain, but the threats to our infrastructure, and that was how there was an attack on the U.S. and how it was pulled off with EPM bombs.
EMP
And
is
so
a
that's
big one too.
yeah. I'll let you, and it's like, you know what? You said it was boring, but it's like, no, this is exactly what people need to be educated about.
And I think a lot
Well,
of people don't realize, in what Pat Walsh said and other people have said, the Chinese are hacking our systems hourly, daily,
Yep.
to try and probe and get in. I think one of the things, and I'm a private pilot, that kind of bothers me is what would happen if they were able to knock out the GPS system. Now, everybody says, no, there's so redundancy,
great.
but there isn't that much redundancy. You knock out the GPS system, you'd have a whole bunch of airliners right now that would have tremendous navigational problems. Now,
Well,
most of
Jim,
those guys are great pilots, yes, sir.
it's worse than that because you're right. So your GPS doesn't work anymore. You can't get Google Maps to work. But it's worse than that because another thing, in addition to position, the GPS system transmits precision timing, and precision timing is the basis for coordination of things like our communications systems. So some that stuff will coast for a while on its own internal clocks, but after a period of time, maybe a day, suddenly long haul communications doesn't work. The internet goes down. So there's a lot more to GPS than just a navigation piece. Frankly, that scares me worse than navigation.
And to say this, we're not trying to scare everybody to death. What we're trying to do is talk about the importance of being prepared, because for every measure, there is a countermeasure. Well, my other hand's not in the screen, but that's okay. You guys can figure out what I'm doing for those that are watching. And that's, again, the importance of a series like this, where we get away from the propaganda, we get away from the politics, and we talk about the facts. What's going on? What do we need to know?
The real problems.
Yeah.
And that is important in our nation, that everybody be informed, everybody understand and know. So I think this national series that you put together needs to go national, needs to really be broadcast out and let people know, and give the whole nation a chance to listen in to what you guys are doing. What you've done is amazing. It's too bad you didn't have Spielberg behind you, or Clint Eastwood, or somebody who could join in and say, yeah, we can get this rocking and rolling. And I think this is so.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, and that is we've been at the last few programs. You've noticed we've had a lot of cadets there. We've had the Marine Corps, Junior ROTC, the Sea Cadets, Civil Air Patrol, and some Air Force ROTC. We're kind of slow. We finally realized what we are presenting is a great resource for these young kids who, number one, are interested in current events, and number two, are looking at making a career out of the military, or at least going into the military. So we started reaching out to all of the ROTC units that we can touch, and invite them. We give them a special price. In fact, for the Air Force side, our chapter will pay the cost. So it's a free ticket, and if they show up in uniform, we give them $10 in cash at the door, because we want to get them. So they can actually make $10 on that. But it's not the money. It's getting those kids out to be exposed to ideas like this and speakers like this. And you just never know what impact that will make downstream.
It's amazing. We had Michael Menazir on, and he talked about at 8 years old, he suddenly figured out this is what he wanted to do, was go to the academy. I heard the same thing out of Clark.
You've lost me.
double amputee that is so active here in Dallas.
Well, Alan
was
Clark.
Alan Clark. Yeah.
Alan Clark.
And I think
Yeah.
it's important because so many people think of the military as, oh, I don't want my son or daughter to go because they're going to get hurt and maimed. No, that's a relatively few people. The opportunities for education, advancement, leadership, training, and camaraderie. I mean, you know, the men and women, the men that I served with in Vietnam, we're going to get together in October. And it's really important. It's really important that we get together.
Let me mention this because I've had the opportunity to be a huge advocate. Even though I'm part of the Cold War generation, I'm a huge advocate for our post 9/11 guys. And it's not just old geezers like Jim and I that want
yourself.
that want to get together, but it's the young guys, because you get out of the military and you realize you miss, and I break it down to one word: purpose. You had an overriding sense of purpose every day you got up. And for a lot of people in the civilian community, that doesn't exist, and it can, which is, and as I tangent away, we talk about the motto of the show. Hang on, let me finish my
sentence. You just said something, though, that is so hugely important, especially for these young people, is all of a sudden giving them a sense of purpose.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is the motto of the show is Charlie Mike. Continue the mission. And our goal is to tell the stories and share the stories, like the story of General LtGen Campbell, as he was part of creating the National Defense Briefing Series, where we continue the role we had in the military. And one of the things that we're doing, we can't defend the nation if people don't know what the threat is. And
that's very true. So we're going to be right back after this word from all of our partners. This is James Blythe, U.S. Navy, and Chuck Wright, U.S. Marine Corps, and the fantastic General LtGen Campbell, who leads this series, the National Defense Briefing Series. And I say that because, General Campbell, what you have put together, what you have led, is truly amazing, and it is continuing the mission. So we'll be right back with more Veterans Impact Show. Welcome back to the Veterans Impact Show, and thanks to our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage and Lone Star Wealth Strategies. Now, let's continue this great conversation. Well, we need to bring this program back into the dock, and so the first thing I want to say to you is go look at the website, the National Defense Briefing Series. And can you put that up again, Nathaniel, our engineer, so people can know about it? Number one, you need to know about it. Number two, if you want to go back and take a look at all of the series that has been put on, and we were just talking
the past series.
Yeah, we were just talking about Ms. Penny. We were talking about Admiral Pat Walsh in the East. We're talking about John Antal. All of these over the last 10 that they've done are an amazing education. And so you can go there and take a look at them for free. You can also, if you believe in what they're doing, and it's not cheap to put this program on, make a donation. Diane and I do, and we think it's so important to support education, information, and communication. So we are continuing the mission to partner up with the National Defense Briefing Series. Again, General Campbell, you have provided so much. I would like for you, though, and I always want to ask this question, what will you say to a young man or a young woman who's thinking about the military when they're in high school or when they're in college? What would you say to them?
Well, you know, the very first thing I'd say, Jim, is, and I don't want to get too esoteric here, but I think that American citizens all should want to contribute something of their lives to the country, whether it's, not everybody's fit for the military, not everybody wants to go to the military, but there are other ways to do that, whether it's you can be, a first responder, you can be a policeman, you can be one of the Peace Corps. There's lots of things you can do, but I think of all that the military makes the most impact and the most rewarding thing to do. Aside from that, it's number one for a lot of young people. And I just use my own situation. I had no idea when I got out of college what I wanted to do. I did know I wanted to go in the Air Force and be a pilot. But aside from that, who knows what I would have done? I've got a young man I've mentored who was headed in the wrong direction and went to the Marine Corps. And now he's a Marine Corps captain, just finished recon school, is getting ready to go to jump school and then dive school. So this kid has really found his niche, and it was the right thing for him to do. And just get down to the nuts and bolts pieces. Stay for 20 years. You have a lifetime pension, and you can still have that second career. So there's just so many good things about the military. Interestingly, I'm leading a task force for the Air Force Association on recruiting. How can the local chapters help out the recruiting effort? You probably know that all the services are having problems now. And part of the problem is, number one, only 23% of the kids in the 18 to 20-year-old age range are qualified.
Yep.
To join the military, either through
major problem,
physical problems, even worse
General
than that. Only 9%, only 9% of the, according to the Army survey, only 9% have even ever considered the military. So that's
an absolute shame, and I couldn't agree with you more. We really appreciate you taking time to be on the show. I wanted to do something we should have done the first segment. I want to thank our producer, Nathaniel Smith of Ascend Podcast, does an outstanding job for us, and the lovely Mrs. Diane Blythe, who runs all the behind the scenes the work. In the next several weeks, we're going to focus on Carry the Load. We're going to have Terry Burgess of the Gold Star Parents Retreat. Sorry, Terry, I kind of didn't bring that out very well.
But we've got a really great guy next week who is a Navy SEAL who has built his own business in training dogs and all. And he basically, I think, was a dog trainer in the SEALs. And so that a veteran who has built his own business, that's going to be an interesting conversation.
And then we've also got the CEO of Sheepdog Impact, which is an organization that supports our veterans that came back with physical and mental issues, including PTSD. They do some incredible work with a retreat that they do up in Arkansas. So we've got a couple of great guests coming up in the immediate future. Tune into that if you're interested in the Navy League. That's coming up the second week in June.
You bet. Let's close out with a prayer. Dear God of all, thank you and bless this broadcast of fellowship and leadership. Thank you for John Campbell and all that he does with the National Defense Briefing Series. Dear God, give our nation's leaders and respond on a wisdom to reunite this nation. Dear God, protect our active duty military and our first responders around the world. They protect us. And we pray, dear God, that you will bring this nation back together. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. This is the Veterans Impact Show, and we're so thrilled that you joined us. Share, get the word out. Let's have some more.